Welcome to Trulyfit.
Brian and Jamie, thank you so much for joining the Trulyfit Podcast. Why don't you give my audience and listeners a little background on who you are and what it is that you do? I don't care who starts, whatever's easiest for you guys.
Hi, everybody. I'm Jamie. I'm co-founder of Weapon Brand, and my cousin Brian and I started this company after he came to visit me in Florida. He wanted me and a bunch of my friends to be safe. He knew we were all going to a music festival in the next couple of months and said, I want to do a workshop for you guys on how to be safe when you're in those types of situations where something bad could happen. So like 30 people came just from a post that I put on Facebook. And we were like, hey, this is really a good thing. They wanted more. They wanted to hear more about Brian's background and his training and the things that he had been doing for the state of Ohio and the Marines for his entire career. So we started Weapon Brand in Florida. He was going to do it in Ohio by himself. And then, we grew up together. We're 3 weeks apart. And so we thought, what a better way to kind of reinvent ourselves, what he had been doing during COVID, running his training facility. And I have a marketing agency, they were both affected. And so we started Weapon Brand, and it's just taken off.
Seems like a match made in heaven, having somebody who has a marketing brand and somebody who had a lot of friends and people who are interested in self-defense, which I assume more women are than men typically for whatever reason. I'm sure we'll get into that. But Brian, why don't you first, let's talk a little bit about self-defense, because I think people are confused about that when you talk about it. There's some misconceptions around it. Sometimes you have charlatans in the industry, these like, I do Wang Chung, or here's a special way to take the knife away from you. Talk about self-defense and why it's important to you and what it's about.
So, Steve, before we even go into the answer to that, I want to tell you something, and this will come back, I'm sure, throughout the podcast, but I want to tell you something just that happened last 30 to 45 minutes. I even text Jamie and I said, hey, I love this guy's questions. I actually took a screenshot of your preview questions, and it's going to come into play, I'm sure, because your questions are coming from a trained mind, an effectively trained mind. And you have no idea how much I appreciate that. And the reason that I bring that up is because of the questions that you just asked right there. They're very different from what we typically get. And that's typically from people that either have the misconceptions of self-defense or people that just have been, I don't want to say ineffectively trained, but not as effectively trained. So I appreciate the questions that you put up there. And I smiled when I read them. I told Jamie, this is it. These questions are perfect. So I appreciate that. And that was one of them. So to answer that question, to get into it, self-defense in our eyes is something that is very easily taught, but even more importantly than that, it's something that the student is able to retain, use effectively, and be able to learn very, very simply. So just to start that question off, that's how I would begin that. But thank you for those questions.
Yeah, of course. And I do think self-defense is important. We talked a little bit on the front end, how, I'm a Muay Thai practitioner. And I actually have zero self-defense with weapons, so it's going to be interesting when we get into that conversation, because I'm really going to be asking from a complete novice's perspective. But let's talk a little bit about your weapon mindset and the psychological portion, and then we'll get into the physical stuff. What exactly do you need from a mental standpoint, from a psychological standpoint, to get into this weapon mindset?
So a lot of the stuff that we teach is through visualization. Sorry. We present different scenarios for them. We actually have them think them through, because obviously we don't have a dojo or a facility that our clients will come to 2 to 3 times a week and learn one specific set of skills. We can teach that to them, and they can sign up as much as they would, they're available and they like. However, what we teach it all in about 90 minutes to 2 hours. So a lot of that is that mindset piece. It's changing the misconceptions. It's giving them a perspective to look at, and it's having them visualize what they would do in that certain situation, only because we know, and I'm sure you know this, the body can't go where the mind's never been. So I could say that I'm going to do something all day long, but if I've never put myself in that position, even visualizing it, you have no idea what you're going to do in that kind of a case.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And let's go through some practical things right away. I mean, from my perspective, that what I've been taught in the past, and correct me if I'm wrong, running away is sometimes the best thing to do, right? It's not using all of these techniques. It's getting away from the danger. Would you agree?
Absolutely. Not only would I agree, but I'd say that's our first thing is always creating distance. Uh, when you're actually in the action, we teach off of what's called an action line. In the beginning of that action line are pre-incident indicators, which we'll get to, but the action, the actual incident, we explain to people, and which I'm sure you'll appreciate this, which is where I tend to debate with a lot of jiu-jitsu players, which I am as well. But getting away is always first and foremost. If you could get away, creating that distance, that's going to be huge, right? That's going to avoid that fight, and that's the fight you'll never lose, the one you could avoid. However, getting away sometimes isn't always an option. So if you have to fight, we also teach how to close the distance to cut their effectiveness. So that's a big part of our skill set. But before we even dive into anything else, I'd like to tell you that one thing that we really pride ourselves on are threat profiling techniques and how to teach people not only how to get out of the situation, but to be able to recognize the situation and avoid it entirely. We teach a lot off of universal behavioral patterns and what humans do. As a matter of fact, it's what animals do as well. But we teach those tactics on how to recognize the situation and avoid the situation. If you can't avoid the situation, how do you fight out of it?
I was actually in a situation maybe 10 years ago, young guy. I've honestly really never really been in a fight. I'm not someone to pick a fight, but things happened on the street. And because of some of my training at the time, which was jiu-jitsu, I had pulled guard. Well, guess why that was a really bad decision? He had two friends who came around the corner. So now I'm on my back and now there's three guys there, right? So I could handle the one in that situation, but not two extra guys coming. And I think that, when you learn some of these fighting techniques, people are always doing them in a one-on-one situation. And that's not always going to be the case when you're in a dangerous situation, like as you teach.
Right. Right. There's three reasons why I would say now jiu-jitsu isn't bad. I'm sure you'd agree with me. Jiu-jitsu is an excellent art. It's an awesome fighting art. It's a great combat sport. However, where people make the mistake with jiu-jitsu is they think, once again, like you did, I'm going to pull guard, I'm going to try to submit somebody. Whereas, what we need to look at jiu-jitsu as far as the self-defense goes, to me, it's not a pure self-defense. It's a form of or not only a form of, it's the foundation from which ground self-defense stems. So if you can teach people some basics on, hey, if you do get knocked to the ground, these are the things you have to do to escape the ground. Because of what you just said, for three reasons, jiu-jitsu becomes dangerous if you're on the ground. Multiple attackers, like you just said. If the individual now presents we call in the law enforcement community a force multiplier, which is a knife or a gun or a rock, a brick. And the third thing is it decreases your mobility. Your mobility is you being able to move and get away. Well, if you're on the ground, that's pretty hard to do. So as much as I love jiu-jitsu, I'm a jiu-jitsu practitioner. I've done jiu-jitsu for years and years. I would tell you that submitting somebody with an armbar takes practice, takes a long time. And why would you want to submit somebody instead of just getting away? The only answer should be to control them, to possibly detain them if you're law enforcement or if you have assets that you're trying to protect just for the time being, but then to get away. So that's my piece on jiu-jitsu. I get a lot of people that really they want to debate it quite a bit, and I got to tell them, look, I love jiu-jitsu. It's a great sport. It's just not a great self-defense.
That makes perfect sense to me. Jamie, why don't you talk a little bit about, because you don't have obviously the initial background in self-defense, and you were someone who was learning this and taking this on. What surprised you? Was it more difficult, more fun? Just what exactly what was your first instincts when you were going through this course?
A few things have surprised me. One, it is so much fun. Like if you watch some of our videos on social, we're always laughing, we're joking around, we're dancing. It's not something that has to be scary. And a lot of people don't come because maybe they have some trauma or PTSD, or they think that if they come, something bad might happen and then they'll have to know what to do. So almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy. But yeah, we have a lot of fun. It is very easy. In fact, the first time I saw Brian teach a class, I was just observing. And then the next time we met with somebody, he called me up and he wanted to use me as an example. Now, mind you, I have never done this physically. And he wanted me to demonstrate what I had observed. And I was able to do it just like that, just from observing it, never having done it physically. So it is easy to learn and easy to remember, and something that we teach off of, that it's something that your body naturally will do in an incident. We just make it more effective. So yeah, it's fun, it's easy, but probably the biggest thing that surprised me is I thought, oh, this is such a great idea for our company. Everybody needs self-defense. Who in the world can't use it? But the thing is, a lot of people think that it will never happen to them, or they'll take it another time, and their safety isn't their priority. Going to a boat show, or going to a parade, or going to, shopping. This excuses that we get for people who aren't taking our classes, like I'll take it another time, that was crazy surprising to me, because now that I'm in this world, I'm much more cognizant of the bad things that can happen and that do happen, and how you have to be prepared, and a lot of people don't take it seriously. So
Yeah, that's a great point. I don't know how you deal with that also, Brian, that in some respects, before you jump into that class, you have to admit to yourself, something bad can happen to me. People don't want to do that. It's almost like when you get what I call like financially naked with a financial advisor and saying like, oh, well, what if I die? I have to get life insurance. Or when you're with me, with personal trainer, you have to say, oh, like I could get sick and die. Like I need to start eating healthier. They have to come and admit that. Do you find that is the biggest barrier to entry when working with you?
It's that's such a huge barrier. The one thing that we teach off of, and Jamie's so right, like when they come into our classes and our seminars, they're already hesitant a lot of times. And we even have people in the class that still are sitting in our class that think this will never happen. So you're so right. Admitting to yourself, first of all, that this is something is huge. And what we try to pass to each and every one of our students, and every podcast that we do, every interview that we do, is we truly do believe that there's more good people out there than bad. There's a lot more people out there that are doing good things for other humans than there are bad people doing bad things to humans. However, it only takes one person. It only takes one incident. So, out of 100 people, those, 99 are good people. It's just you don't know who that one is that makes up that 100. So that's why we teach, first of all, that mindset of accepting the fact. We teach off of what's called, it's an acronym, AR, and the first one is acceptance. Accept the fact that it could happen to you or your family. Statistics show that. And I could guarantee that every single person, even that listens to your podcast, has been in some kind of a situation where they thought, this looks a little bit shady or a little bit sketchy. This person's looking at me a little bit funny. Is this person following me? However, they still go through with it and they got lucky. They just don't know they got lucky. So accepting the fact that it could happen to you. And then what we teach, like we said earlier, is recognizing the signs. So yeah, absolutely.
Yes,
That's a barrier.
I want to hold on to that because I think that's a really good point. Do you teach, or would you say now, even if you don't teach it, that if your instincts are telling you the situation seems shady, to not go into that situation? I'm walking on one side of the street. It feels weird. Let me just cross to the other side of the street.
Yeah, we absolutely do. So we teach off of, we mentioned earlier, universal behavioral patterns. But the one thing that you have to trust in when you're watching for those behavioral patterns is what you see and what you feel. We give the analogy all the time that if you're driving down, we'll say I'm here near Pinellas Park, so we'll say route 275. If I'm driving down Interstate 275 and I'm I'm doing 15 miles over the speed limit and I see a trooper in the median, automatically, what do we all do? We slow down. We slow down and we watch. We press that the brake pedal at times, and we try to get below that speed limit. However, when you're pulling into a gas station and you see somebody that kind of just throws you off a little bit, or you see that you're in a situation that maybe I shouldn't really be in this area, you still go through with it. It's like, you're trying to save yourself from getting a ticket, spending money, but you're not thinking that your self-worth is important enough, or you're not accepting the fact that it could really happen to you enough that you avoid that situation like you would on the highway, right? So absolutely. So recognizing it, understanding it first, and then recognizing it is huge, Steve. And we do.
All right,
Do you
now
want to,
walk me. Go
Brian,
on,
do you
Jamie.
want to tell the story about Catherine and crossing the street, since he had
Oh
mentioned
yeah,
that?
man, that is a great story, and something to build off of what you said, Steve. This goes perfectly. So Catherine she's one of our great clients, right? And she's one of our early clients. So um, she gave us the story that she is, and she's just your normal average person that before any of this happened to her, she was already a little bit iffy with some things. Um, but a very trusting person. She was walking down the street. Two individuals were on the same side. She did trust in what she saw. She did trust her intuition, and something told her just to cross that street. Well, when she did cross that street, they started yelling obscenities. They started yelling to her that she was a racist, she's prejudiced, all these things. And that left a really bad taste in her mouth. And she brought that up to us, and she said, I crossed the street because I first I needed to, because that's where my house was, and second I just kind of trusted my gut. But now I don't know if I would do that because of what they yelled. And we simply said, well, they probably weren't good people anyway if they were yelling that stuff. And if you didn't cross the street, what possibly would have happened? So at least you did create that distance that we talk about, and you were able to see a little bit better, visualize what could possibly happen. So um, that was pretty huge for her to hear, and for us to back up that you did the right thing. You absolutely did, even though they're yelling things. Well, that just confirmed that they probably weren't the best people. And I asked her a very simple question: are you a racist? And she laughed and said, no, absolutely not. I said, okay, well, then what are you worried about? If you know who you are, if you know that you didn't cross the street because you're not prejudiced, well, then why are you worried? So just because they think you are doesn't make you one. You know. So that was that really hit home for her, I know, and that really helped out. So I'm glad that both of you brought that up.
Yeah, and imagine, not trusting your instincts because you think you're going to offend someone, and
Yeah.
what could potentially happen down the road, right?
Yep.
Your instincts are not looking at things like that. Your instincts are simply saying, I feel unsafe for whatever reason. I'm going to cross. And guess what? The fact of the matter is, if you're a female and there's multiple guys walking on one side of the street, and you're in a situation where you don't feel like there's a lot of other people around, you're probably going to feel unsafe, right? Your
Right.
best bet is probably cross the road, regardless of who these
Right.
guys are.
Right. And if anything, what that shows to them is that you were aware enough to see what was ahead of you and you acted on it. So, and that action is huge. A lot of people don't realize how much those tiny little signs that you put off will make you look like more of a harder target than possibly what you are. So, and bad guys don't want the hard targets. They want the easy targets. And something, just a point, one of the things that we tell all of our people that when you were saying that, Steve, that reminded me of is, we try to tell all of our clients and everybody out there that, stop giving the bad guy the benefit of the doubt. His feelings aren't worth your life. So when you stop saying, well, I'm going to try to prevent hurting this person's feelings and putting my life in danger, giving them the keys to my own life, that's when you start making yourself a hard target also. When you say,
Walk
I'm done giving these people the benefit of the doubt, and they might actually hurt me, so I'm going to create distance.
walk me through, I guess you would call it the structure of your model, of your class, of your course. Day one, somebody walks in. Does it matter how much experience they might have already? We talked before, if I'm walking in as opposed to somebody who has maybe nervous about this, are they starting at the same level? Do they finish at the same level? How exactly does this work?
So the cool thing about our system is, we've got a ton of stuff, but I'll just give you a few different examples of our basic courses. We have a personal safety and threat awareness class, and that's our creating a weapon mindset, which is all lecture based. In a perfect world, if you could take that first and then take level 1, 2, 3, 4, you would learn, I guess, most advantageously. So, because they would flow the best. However, we tell people you don't have to see the first movie to understand the second. So, if you jumped into a level 3, you're still going to learn things. You're just going to learn a little bit more of how it flows if you took 1 and 2. That's all. Same thing with the personal safety and threat awareness. Excuse me. If you take personal safety and threat awareness, you're going to understand those universal behavioral patterns. You're going to learn those pre-incident indicators, those pre-contact cues, all those things that humans do directly before the fight. Once you're in the fight, that's where level 1 through 4 comes. Then level 5 is everything together. So it's almost like the pressure testing of all of it. Level 5 is the only one that we say you have to take level 1 through 4 before you get to 5. All the other ones, they're standalone, but they flow together. So just to break that down, like we said, creating a weapon mindset, personal safety and threat awareness, that's going to give you the indicators, what to look out for, understanding that you have to accept the fact it may happen, recognize them, try to avoid them. Now, level 1 goes into those pre-contact cues. What are you looking for as far as body language right before the attack? Once the attack happens, what are your best positions? Defensive framing as far as creating a lane and just enough space for you to be able to do a chin lift, an eye gouge. We do elbow striking in level 2 as well as some other defensive striking, palm heel strikes, things like that, choke escapes. And then once we get into level 3, we go into it's more of a subject control type of element, but it's anchor points. It's closing the distance, isolating the danger, and cutting their effectiveness is what it is. So it's a lot of underhooks and overhooks, and that's level 3. Level 4 is more of joint manipulation. What are you doing with it's kind of an Aikido base in a sense. However, I wouldn't say it's strictly Aikido because Aikido is what, quite honestly, I throughout the majority of it, when I took over the state of Ohio's defensive tactics program, we just kind of honed in on what was effective and built off of it. So level 4 is kind of an Aikido base, but it's mainly joint manipulation, and it's putting all those other things together. You know, can I go from a defensive frame into an anchor point, and if I'm still struggling, can I do some kind of an outside wrist turn to be able to get out of the door, get out of the way? That's pretty much the basics right there.
Do you think there'll ever be a one centralized program, whether it's Weapon Brand or someone else? Because I'm sure you know this comes, someone disagrees and is going to say, you should use a little bit more joint manipulation. Someone might say, no, you should be keeping away and then running. Someone should say, we should do only headshots. Someone should say, just elbows and knees. And why and when is it ever going to be sort of more scientifically proven where, hey, these techniques work better than the others?
Yeah. So I hate to say this, but I really don't ever think, because there's so much cognitive bias with you and I would probably tend to go towards a Muay Thai clinch, maybe instead of a defensive frame, right? Because we know it, because that's what we've practiced. That's what our MO is. However, somebody that's completely basic, it's funny because before I answer that question, one thing we consistently see with people is they want to punch. They always want to punch, close their fist. They always want to punch. That's self-defense. But it's like, man, we teach boxing and we teach some Muay Thai stuff, but that's probably one of the last things we're actually showing you, just because you're not able to do it effectively if you're not experienced in doing it and understanding range and things like that. However, to answer your question, I really don't think, Steve, that there's ever going to be one centralized self-defense because of what we just talked about, because of that cognitive bias, and all of us are doing different things. And the bottom line is people need to make money. So there's a lot of self-defense instructors out there that that's their trade. That's what they do. That's their skill set. That's how they're going to make money. Well, they spent time, effort, blood, sweat, and tears on learning that art, and that's what they're teaching because that's all they know how to teach typically, right? Which isn't a bad thing. And if people are learning something, that's the thing. If people are learning something, we're happy. We're just know something. We always start our class, especially our physical classes, with doing something is always better than nothing. Fighting back is always better than saying, okay, I'm going to hope I get out of this situation, right? But to answer your question, I really don't ever think there's going to be something centralized. However, and this is just a little plug for Weapon Brand, our goal is to be the national household name for self-defense. That's what we want to be. We want to be known as if you need self-defense for your corporation, if you need self-defense for your family, and you need to learn it fast, you need to learn something effective and something that's going to be pretty easy. Call us up, and we're going to teach you how to avoid that fight. If you can't, we're going to teach you how to fight out of it using those techniques that I've learned throughout the years, and then what we pass on to everybody else.
Steve, I wanted to mention you had asked about, is somebody who's trained going to get the same experience as someone who isn't trained? In one of our very first self-defense classes, my dad came, and he's a black belt in karate, and he's actually come to several of our classes since, and he said that every time he comes, he learns something new. And so it doesn't matter if you are a trained master and have been, practicing martial arts for your entire life, or, you've never thrown a punch or defended yourself in any way. We can help from even kids, we start around ages 7, 8, 9, up to very elderly people. We have people who are in walkers, wheelchairs, use canes. Brian's an adaptive athlete coach. So we deal with some young adults who have cerebral palsy. I think he trains a blind boxer back up in Ohio, a woman who's deaf. So whatever, we've done self-defense with some women in wheelchairs as well. So whatever your ability level is, you're going to get something out of it.
Yeah, that's great. And I'll add real quick, Brian, before you hop in here.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you've ever played poker with someone who doesn't know how to play, it's very difficult because they'll get a 2-7 and they'll go all in, and you don't know if they're bluffing or not, but they just really don't know what they're doing. And that if you're in a street fight or a martial art with someone who doesn't practice that martial art, you don't necessarily know what's next. So when we're learning martial arts, when I'm in a Muay Thai class, I'm against somebody else, and I know all of their techniques. I know what I should be blocking, what I should counter with. But when you're fighting someone on the street, there are no rules.
Sporadic, yeah, absolutely. That's such a good point. And that you've taken some jiu-jitsu classes, you've done some jiu-jitsu, Steve, as well as I have, but the hardest people to spar with at the end of class are the white belts. The people that have no idea, but they're just going full force, flailing arms, doing anything they can, using every bit of might that they can. They burn out pretty quick, but it's like, those are the ones that are the hardest ones to roll with, because they're so unpredictable in a sense. So that goes right back to your point. And I think if it's like that with Muay Thai, it's like that with jiu-jitsu, it's like that with anything really. But something that I used to do to get buy-in is, man, I used to teach when I worked for the state. At one point, I was teaching 80 to 100 students every other week for 3 days straight, 3 8-hour days. And you got to think about the environment. There were a lot of correction officers, a lot of law enforcement officers, parole officers, people that worked in different types of badge settings, So those people already, and anybody in that field knows what I'm talking about, they already kind of have that ego in a sense, especially when they've had some type of martial arts, some type of fighting background, some type of wrestling background. They already have kind of that preconceived notion that, what could this guy really show? So one way that I would get buy-in, and one way that and this is for any self-defense instructor that's listening out there, one way to really get your students to buy in is, first of all, don't look at it as what you can show. Look at it as what they can learn. What can you show them to learn, not what you know. They could care less what you know. That sounds great from the very beginning, but if you can actually teach them something, that's where you start to get that buy-in. And how I would get it from the very beginning was I would ask from the very beginning, where are my boxers? All right, they'd raise their hands. Where are my wrestlers? Where are my back street fighters? Where are my bar brawlers at? Okay, jiu-jitsu guys, where you got MMA, girls and ladies and guys, where you guys? So, and you get all these people raising hands, right? How about people that have taken self-defense at your church? Where are my military people? All these people are raising their hands. And you look, and you've pretty much hit everybody, right? And I tell them, so everything that you've learned is worth something, because doing something is always better than than nothing. However, what we're going to do, and what Jamie and I do with this system, and our other instructors obviously, is we teach you how to make those things a little bit better because we add to it. All we're doing is giving more guns for your armory, is what it is. We're giving you more for the arsenal. And if you don't like what we're doing, if you can't attach it to what you already do, then you're good. But if you know nothing, then learn something. And what we have is what we feel is the best, because it's approximately 10 different arts, 10 different systems, all filtered and put into what is, once again, the easiest to learn, the simplest to retain, and the most highly effective, with those three things combined.
Now that you use that analogy, more guns for your arsenal, let's hop into guns here. So I'm somebody who has only shot guns maybe a handful of times. I do not own a gun, and I don't know a lot about guns. So you can talk to me like I am naive, because I am in this situation. And I'm always under the impression that if a gun is in the mix, the situation is now more dangerous, whether Brian has it or whether Steve, a novice, has it. Is that the case? Is that not the case? How do you go about talking about bringing guns into a situation?
100% the case. There are so many misconceptions, not just with guns, Steve, but any tool. We consider a gun a defensive tool, just like we would consider a rock a defensive tool, pepper spray a defensive tool, brass knuckles a defensive tool. Anything that you're going to use outside of your hand and what you could actually physically do with your body or mentally with your brain, that's a secondary tool, because you weren't born with it. I'm 47 years old, and I could tie my shoe without thinking. However, I've been shooting guns and doing things in the military and law enforcement community since I've been 19 years old, and I could still tell you that I still feel like there's a ton I need to learn, only because I'm not using that gun every single day in and day out. So yeah, to answer your question, it definitely presents more danger having a gun in the mix, regardless, no matter if you're well trained or not, because of these three reasons. You don't know if there's multiple subjects. You don't know if they have a gun, and you don't know what their skill level is. And their skill level also includes luck. And we can't count on luck, but luck counts, right? So a gun being presented in any situation obviously is always more dangerous.
What do you consider the most effective gun, or the recommended gun for in-home self-defense? I briefly looked it up at one point, and people are all over the map. Obviously, whatever people have is what they're going to tell you is best. So it's hard to read into it. But what would be your suggestion, or what is the general suggestion?
So I would say a shotgun would probably be one of the better things, only because, one, everybody knows that noise, right? When you rack that shotgun, everybody knows what that noise is. The other thing is you don't have to be very accurate with a shotgun. There's a wide pattern that spreads out, obviously, and they're pretty easy to use. The only thing about a shotgun, though, is they're clunky. They're long, they're heavier. So for me, I mean, I'm a Glock guy, but I'm going to say it's personal preference. Big misconception with handguns that we have our demographic is are women generally, and we have a lot of them that say, well, this person told me I should get this smaller gun because it fits my hands. That's a big misconception, because there's more power coming out of the thing. There's usually a lot more kick, so something a little bit more to grab onto is usually a little bit easier for you. However, you still need to be able to handle it. But I would say, to answer your question directly, for me, I would always suggest some type of a shotgun.
Yeah, that's what I've read. That makes the most sense. I think, like you said, there's always caveats, right? If you're walking around with a shotgun, again, I know nothing about guns, but I assume if you come through a doorway, the shotgun could be sticking out. The bad guy has more likely chance of grabbing the shotgun, let's say. But again, that's a caveat. Who knows what situation you're going to be in at any given time? But that's good to know. And then as far as what do you, and this is I know a very general, vague question, but how long does it actually take to be somewhat proficient? You just sort of hinted on it and said that you've been shooting guns since you're 19 years old, and you still don't feel like you're the absolute most proficient person. Is this just one of those never-ending tasks where it takes you a lifetime to become good at it?
Yeah, I mean, the one thing is that those skills are perishable. So if you're not practicing, they go away. And and when I say that, right now you're going to have some people that are thinking, "Oh crap! Well, if these three are talking about that, maybe I need to get to the range more." Once again, that's another misconception. If you ask any special operator, they're going to tell you that they practice more fundamentals, dry firing, and drawing from the holster, also in different positions, more than 85% of the time compared to shooting the actual gun. So, a lot of people, what they don't realize is they think, well, I'm going to get this gun and I'm going to take this CCW class, or I'm going to go, watch some YouTube videos, and then I'm going to go to the range once or twice a month, and I'm going to know how to protect myself. Well, there's a lot of things that are factored into that, and that's a dangerous situation because shooting the gun is obviously the that's the detrimental part of it. But are you able to get a well aimed or well placed shot? Are you able to get more than one shot? I'm going to run through some of this stuff with you real quick. That we put out in our weapons retention class. Shooting one person one time, unless it hits an extremely vital area, is not going to stop them typically. They don't even know they're shot. Adrenaline, cortisol takes over. You ask any ER nurse or doctor, and when you ask them about gunshot wounds or even stab wounds, they'll tell you one of the first things that the individual says was, "I didn't even know it happened," or "I didn't know what it was," because they don't feel it until later. So that's one thing to consider. Another thing to consider is how well aimed or how well placed is your shot going to be. If you're struggling with that gun, did you practice? Did you practice moving with that gun? Did you practice shooting a moving target? When people go to the range, they shoot at a piece of paper that's not swearing at them, that's not running at them, that's not trying to attack them, that's not trying to get to their kids. That piece of paper is sitting still, and your adrenaline isn't high. It might be slightly higher because if you're not used to going to the range a whole lot, but you don't go through those gross motor skills, or have to resort back to those gross motor skills. For instance, when an event happens, your sympathetic nervous system effects take over. You start to lose that fine dexterity. You no longer have complex and fine motor skills. You go to gross. So think about what that is. Just manipulating something with my fingers, like writing something with a pencil or using chopsticks, right? If I gave Jamie a set of chopsticks and said, "Hey, we're going for sushi tonight. However, you're going to do 100 push-ups and I'm going to be trying to strike you while you're doing it," it's not going to be easy for her to use those chopsticks, right? Imagine that with a gun now. Imagine that with something that could possibly kill you, right? So many people don't understand that. And that's one of the biggest reasons why we push more than anything that weapons retention class, to get them into that mindset to think, okay, now that I have this gun, I need two classes. Not so much my CCW, because I'm not going to be comfortable enough to carry this thing out in public in case something happens, until I take weapons retention, which is, how do I hold on to this in a shooting event? How do I hold on to this if somebody's trying to attack me, or even if I'm trying to pull this gun? And then the other class is the fundamentals class. Do I know how to actually function this gun? And then do I know how to function enough to eat, or I'm sorry, I was going to say, like I would a bowl of cereal, to eat cereal. I could eat a bowl of cereal under pressure, but can you actually function that gun under pressure? Can I take that magazine out, put it back in? Can I rack the slide? Am I able to clear a malfunction or clear a stoppage? If a tiny little point, if your slide from a pistol gets pushed back 1 millimeter, it's considered out of battery. It will not fire. So if I'm grabbing your gun and you're trying to shoot me with it, you're either going to get one shot off because the recoil isn't going to be natural and it's not going to recycle, or it's not going to go off because the slide is being pushed back. So many people don't realize that. So taking that weapons retention class, you learn a lot of that. And cool part of that is the byproduct of that is now you start to learn also how to disarm people.
I'm going to ask you a question here, being selfish. The thing that I'm most scared of, I have an 18-month-old daughter, and we go on a lot of walks. And if this is outside of your wheelhouse, you can just say it. But what I'm most nervous of is giant dogs. I don't know, rabid dogs that are running around. Do you have general or specific self-defense against, let's say, large animals?
So we don't teach it. However, it kind of goes back to some of the stuff that we teach with animals, and a lot of times depending on the animal, the biggest thing I would say is from anything that I've read or I've learned, obviously you're going to create a barrier for your child. You're going to get in front of it, and then you're going to get as large as you can and as loud as you can. Um, and then obviously this actually goes back to the human aspect of it. If you are being attacked or if it's trying to go after your child, go straight for the eyes. Go to where it hurts it the most. If you can get to the eyes, that's going to be your best bet physically. If you're going to carry something, I know people carry sticks, things like that, but maybe some type of a spray wouldn't be bad for dogs. However, I would say, don't be misconceived. Spray is maybe better for dogs than it is for humans. We have a whole bit on that, as far as people carrying pepper spray. But I guess my amateur answer to that would be create a barrier, get large, get loud, and if they do attack, go for the eyes.
Well, let me sort of feed off that question because my brain was going as you were answering that. Let's go ahead and say somebody just didn't want to carry a gun. They were against it. They said, you know what, I don't want to carry a gun. That's just not part of who I am and what I want to do, or I can't carry a gun for some reason or another. Maybe it's a legal reason. Would you recommend that they have a knife on them? Is now that situation way more dangerous if I'm carrying a knife, or would you recommend that if somebody was worried about, caring about their self-defense, that they carry some sort of knife on them?
So there's a couple of different avenues for that. The first thing that I would tell you is your confidence level sometimes will create a harder target. If you have something that makes you more confident, you're going to carry yourself more confidently, right? So if that helps you, okay, I could buy into that. However, once again, we categorize that as a secondary tool, a secondary measure. If you are well trained with a knife, you're well trained on how to also defend a knife, which we have that class, knife defense. Then carry your knife. I carry a knife, but I still would fight with my hands before I would grab my knife. I typically use my knife to open packages and things like that, right? Instead of carrying it for self-defense. However, it goes right back to, how often has somebody that carries a knife practiced stabbing with a knife? Same thing with pepper spray. Ask all your listeners now that carry pepper spray, when was the last time you tested it? Does it work? When was the last time you actually shot at something that's fighting you? When was the last time you shot it at something in wind? When was the last time you actually got it in your own eyes to see if you were able to fight through it? Because that's typically what's going to happen. I've been sprayed several times in my eyes with pepper spray. When I tried to attack Jamie, no, that's a joke. When with my career, and I had to fight through it each time. And I'm telling you, it's absolutely horrible, but I did it. So now imagine if somebody's committed to that act of taking your child or taking you and getting you into their car or, trying to do damage to you somehow. They're committed to that act because they know now if they get caught, they're going to prison. So they're going to do everything they can not to get caught and still commit that act. So to answer your question, as far as any kind of a secondary device, if you're trained on it, you're proficient with it, you're effectively trained on it, I should say, and it makes you more confident, go for it, carry it. But I can just tell you what we teach is we teach how to avoid, you can't avoid, how to fight using your hands, your body, things that you were born with. And then if you have to go to a secondary measure, I will tell you this, Steve, criminals, typically when they see that you have something on you, it is a deterrent. But let's keep something in mind. The majority of police officers that are killed in any kind of a shooting event, they're killed with their own gun. So, if you really think about that, there's really nothing different with a knife or pepper spray. It could still be used against you.
I think there are so many people who believe that they currently have some system of self-defense, like a pepper spray, like a knife that their parent gave them. I'm not picking on females by any means, but my wife at one point, before we met, carried around pepper spray, and they believe that they now have self-defense. But what they're missing is what you guys teach, that weapon mindset. Well, in what situation would you use this? If an attacker came to you and you had the time to pull it out, wouldn't it be better maybe to just run? If you had the time to pull it out, you might have had the time to run if he's already 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 feet away from you. And you don't know that until you go through courses like yours and you get put into those sort of psychological experiments of what I do or what should I do at any given time.
Absolutely. It's so 100% on point.
So let my listeners know where they can find everything about you guys personally, about Weapon Brand, what you do, and anything that you want to tell my audience as far as the easiest way to find you and to hopefully use you guys.
Yeah. So you can find us online at weaponbrand.com. We're on most of the socials. We're on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, Meetup. If you're in the Florida area, we have lots of events. So all of our events are listed on weaponbrand.com and also on our Facebook events. So just check us out there. You can always email us at info@weaponbrand.com. There's also a link on our website for that. But if you look for Weapon Brand, you'll find us.
Great. My guests today have been Brian Anderson and Jamie Anderson of Weapon Brand. Thank you so much for joining the Trulyfit Podcast.
Thank
Thanks
you,
so much,
Steve. It's
Steve.
been fun.